Earlier this year, we talked about how Nigel Farage's bank accounts in his own country in the UK were closed because the bank didn't agree with him. Well, now there's predictions that woke bankers are going to control whether you have a bank account by checking your social media. I'm going to be honest. I don't get quite as worked up about some of this stuff as many of our audience members, even many of our clients do, in part because I've protected myself with great international diversification, and if one banker somewhere wants to screw with me, that's fine. I do think these things are somewhat isolated to the West. I'm going to come back and touch on that in a moment. Obviously, you need some kind of regulation, and I think that what a lot of people who are first starting this journey don't understand is no matter where you bank, your bank is going to want to know some basic details. But what I can tell you is when I see the news stories in the West, which I left a long time ago, I see Australians can't get cash out of their bank. I talk to friends in the United States who have real difficulties just going out and buying a car for their son, and they get treated like criminals. We see what happened with Nigel Farage in the UK. Bank accounts closed, other banks don't want to work with him. I say to myself, obviously you want some safeguards in the financial system, but you see certain banks go and get into business with the Mexican cartels and they get a slap on the wrist and you can't get your cash out. You start to say to yourself, there's something wrong with the system. Well, now Nigel Farage, who spoke at our live event in 2022, is saying that we're on the verge of banks running word checks on customers' social media. I'll tell you what he says, you be the judge. Banks are working with credit agencies to roll out word checks of social media accounts to assess how worthy of banking facilities members of the public are, says Brexit's Nigel Farage, as his new freedom of speech campaign gains momentum. Having a bank account is essential to exist in the modern Western world, and yet moves to further debank the public if they don't hold views that don't align with the prevailing elite view we're developing. The Brexit leader turned anti-woke campaigner, Nigel Farage, told Breitbart News Daily. Far from merely being institutions which serve an important role in society by taking deposits and then making loans, and then making a profit, of course, by doing so. Nothing wrong with profit. Banks have now become highly politically active, Mr. Farage warned. This is a campaign he has taken up to increasing effect in the United Kingdom after he was debanked for not aligning with his bank's newfound left-wing values. This will be part of a growing trend if it isn't nipped in the bud now, Farage warned, revealing even more intrusive steps to ensure those with conservative opinions can't pay bills or make purchases or coming. He said banks signed up to ESG governance programs and seem to be staffed by employing wokies who are just filled for an almost hatred for people who don't subscribe to their worldview. And the article goes on and on. Nigel Farage did say, when we interviewed him back in 2022, yeah, the other side does hate. There is this idea, and listen, I think this is true to someone on both sides, the other side's the only one doing bad stuff. But there is certainly a view from these folks that, hey, if you are too loud, if you have certain opinions, you aren't welcome. A lot of people are looking at this and saying, I'm just going to go entirely into Bitcoin, into cryptocurrency, that'll save me. Well, that'll save you until people who you have to pay won't accept it, because the law, from maybe the bankers' lobbyists or just what the government wants to do to stifle innovation, to stifle competition, when they say, hey, yeah, not allowed to accept that. Now, who knows if and when that happens? But I know this. Look at all the big companies, whether they're banks, big corporations, your supermarket chain, whatever. They're not going to go against the law to take your Bitcoin. I think we have to look further because, I grew up in the United States. I haven't been there for quite a long time. People keep coming and telling me, oh my goodness, you wouldn't believe how bad it's got. People are now even telling me it doesn't even function that well anymore. Stuff doesn't even work that well anymore. At first it was, okay, culture's changing. Now it's stuff doesn't work. Now, I'm not going to get into all the culture war stuff. I'm somewhat agnostic on some of that. But when it comes to people not being able to bank to pay their bills, that becomes a real problem. We have crypto. We have Bitcoin as part of some of our policies. I hold some of it. I don't think we're at the point where we just go all in on that yet. I think you have to function in a world where not everyone's going to take your crypto. And so the idea here is you have to find a place where these policies don't apply. Now, what some people, they'll sit in the United States and say, oh, well, but China was a big proponent of some of these policies. So, if you can't go to China, what's the answer? We have to stop acting as if there's the US and the UK and Canada where Justin Trudeau's threatening to freeze your bank account and stop you from traveling. And Australia is actually literally stopping you from traveling during the pandemic. You couldn't travel, you couldn't get out or in, and saying the only alternative is China. There's lots of places in the middle. And we've talked about before, I've mentioned this to Nigel Farage in person. And we ran into Nigel Farage before our event, before he spoke at our event in Montenegro. And he's in Montenegro saying, you know what? Maybe this place is more free. You would not have said that a couple of decades ago. I think you can very well say that today. When I flew through Heathrow Airport recently, I rarely do that. It was a very different feeling, honestly, than any other airport that I fly through. London, all of it now, including the suburbs, has this ultra-low emission zone. If you want to drive around your own neighborhood and you don't drive the right kind of car, you've got to pay a big daily fee. They're going to keep pushing those kind of policies. Everything indicates that the UK, the US, Canada, they had a whole documentary on how they're going down a dark path. Australia, the same way. These legacy brand, English-speaking Western countries, they have a path. They do not turn on a dime, these countries. The average person in any society is largely asleep. They're not paying much attention. But what we see from Western countries is, yeah, bring in socialism. Even bring in communism. There's small percentages now, but it's growing. Bring in communism because they forgot what made them successful in the first place. They're so detached, like an heiress. They're so detached from what originally made them successful to where it's like, what problem should we have today? How about if you don't agree with me, I'm not going to let you bank. I'm not going to let you exist. I can tell you, I think a lot of other countries in the world, we've talked about, parts of Latin America, parts of Eastern Europe, they've learned their lesson on this. Parts of Asia, cash is the standard. Parts of the Middle East, the same way. They are not on the same page. And I don't think, going back to seeing Nigel Farage in Montenegro, that Montenegro, number one, they don't really care that much. Number two, I don't know if they have the resources. And really, it's just like, do whatever you want. Why? They have a toughness in that part of the world and in other parts of the world where they're like, whatever, you disagree with me, you insult me, whatever, you're an idiot, go away. You're a stupid person. They don't have to go and shut down your access to bank to prove a point. They just walk away. I've told you for years, we ask people when we help them, do you have a criminal record? We don't take people with serious criminal records, but we've had clients. Oh, when I was 18, I got drunk and I urinated behind a bush somewhere in Alabama. And the cops came and it was a big to-do. You go to most countries in the world, people are peeing in bushes all the time. Nobody, go home. We're not going to arrest you and put you in the system and put some big sounding charge against you. These countries operate differently. I just fundamentally don't think that in most places in the world, the woke bankers are going to start running word checks on your social media. But I can tell you, you want to apply for a U.S. visa, they've talked about, hey, they check your social media. You can say, hey, that's great. We need to know who's coming into our country. Fine. You think that other countries aren't going to do that? And once the camel's nose is under the tent, you don't think that they keep doing that? We talked recently, there's a big story in the U.S. You're going to need a visa to go to Europe. You're not really going to need a visa. You're going to need to apply for pre-clearance. And I told you it's going to be pretty benign and not going to be much of an issue for 99+% of people. But guess what? Once the infrastructure is in place, the U.S. has used the same infrastructure to target people who went to Cuba on vacation. They went for a Caribbean vacation. Now you can't come to the U.S. Once the camel's nose is under the tent, once these countries have in the culture, they're going to check your social media. They're going to tell you where you can go on vacation. They're going to tell you where you can go on holiday. Do you really think it's so extreme to say that what's essentially the same level of bureaucracy, a bank, is going to run a word check on your social media? Listen, maybe the word check starts out as benign. Oh, we just want to make sure you're not part of ISIS or something. Again, does it get any better over time? The answer is going to places where they just don't, they don't care. And I'm not saying that those countries don't have regulations, that things are unsafe, that they're letting people get away with stuff. But this idea that the society we live in the West today, the society that you live in the West, basically says, if you don't think we should run word checks, and if you don't agree with the group, if you don't agree with us, you shouldn't be able to bank. And then if you don't agree with that, you must be up to no good. That's the perfect. I bet people watching this said, oh, they don't check your social media in Montenegro means they're not doing something right, or people are going there and getting away with stuff and it's shady. No, they just don't care what you do in your personal life. Do you meet the conditions of having a bank account? And I keep telling you, you live in the US, you live in the UK, the news you're watching. I mean, I watch, Piers Morgan sometimes. He interviews people from the UK, interviews people from the US. Not interviewing a lot of people from Honduras or Montenegro or Vietnam or anywhere else. And you're not getting the perspective that there are plenty of other places that are perfectly fine. US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, UK, these are the places that have a lot of problems. Maybe some countries in continental Europe. But, I even talked to friends of mine from Switzerland, like, we're not doing that much woke stuff compared to what we see in like the US. It's so much of a difference. The answer to avoiding this kind of stuff is geographical diversification. Pure and simple. Not only are you not going to be protesting anything in the country where you have a bank account, right? You go and open a bank account in Georgia, for example. You can get a bank account in the country of Georgia with like $1. Even if there's things in the country of Georgia you don't agree with, are you going to go and like join a protest? Are you going to post on your social media how you don't agree? No. So first of all, you're not going to be a target in the first place. You're looking at where can I put my money where it's going to be safe, which should be the basis of having a bank account. And yet, not a single bank in the U.S. that makes the top 50 safest banks, period. So if you're banking in the U.S., banking safety isn't your issue. It's not your biggest issue. So number one, if you have a bank account somewhere else, you're not going to be potentially getting yourself into trouble as people in Canada did in 2022 because you're detached and where do you live and where your banking lives. But on top of that, Georgia, the Bank of Georgia, did have an issue. If you were a Russian passport holder, you had to sign a statement denouncing Putin and Russia as an occupier because 20% of Georgia is occupied by Russia. If you don't agree with that policy, then Georgia's not your place to bank. But the point is there's going to be somewhere to bank where you agree and where they don't care about your perspective. They just want to know, is your money clean and do you meet our requirements? And so Georgia's a place to start with $1. Singapore is an asset haven. The UAE is increasingly favorable. There's places where you can open up a bank account and get a residence permit, everywhere from Ecuador to countries in Europe that offer golden visas to Thailand or Malaysia in Asia. And whether you just want to open a bank account to move some funds and make sure they're safe, I would happen to find a place where I can bank and get a residence permit on top of that. Heck, you put some money in the bank in Turkey, not my number one asset haven, but you can put some money in Turkey. You get citizenship if you keep the money in the bank for 3 years. Now you're giving yourself residence or citizenship in a country that operates differently than yours, right? And you can tell. Look at countries like Turkey. Look at countries like the UAE in some of these wars. They are more neutral. I'm not saying, you want to be on one side or the other, but I'm saying, as the world becomes more and more divided, you want to have more neutral options in your life. And so the solution, very simply, is what Nomad Capitalist helps people do every day. You start by having a bank account somewhere else. You may have to report that account legally, and you should do that. But you should not look at that as an impediment to getting a bank account in a foreign country, because you're buying your freedom. You're buying optionality. You are buying making sure that what happened to Nigel Farage doesn't entirely happen to you. We can help you do that at Nomad Capitalist. We help people open bank accounts. We help people get residences. We help people get citizenships. And sometimes, really, we do that all together. Go to nomadcapitalist.com and learn more. I've been doing it for years. I've diversified. We aim to run the squeakiest clean of businesses. I'm the goody two-shoes of offshore. That's what they called me. They didn't mean to be so nice when they called me that, but that's what people called me, because I like to play by the rules. But even playing by the rules, I think some people in the Western world who have alternate opinions, they're getting themselves into trouble. It doesn't matter if they play by the rules. It matters that they ran afoul of some people who have big Twitter accounts. And the solution to that, and why I'm not as concerned, is because I've diversified to places that are neutral. You can do the same. We'd be happy to help you.